Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Shalakaya Chakshurmilitanena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jalam Vita Buddho Kanakavarato Sankirtanaya Kritito Kamalaya Tasho Vishvambara Dvijaharo Yugatama Palo Ade Jagatpirkaro Kananavataro Vande Shri Krishna Caitanya Nityananda Sahodita Gauraye Pushpavanto Chitraskando Tamando Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Padaya Charanasavo Suvado Paramando Sundaro Suvadriyo Hare Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopiha Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Charanchamurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Shri Guru Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki Jai Shri Guru Madhava ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrta ki Jai Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Mahashaya ki Jai Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. So we're discussing from chapter 8 of Hari Lila, and as we heard yesterday, that this chapter is to a large extent a confessional, it takes a confessional type of form in which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaks about his life and the extension, really, of the blessing that he received from the Nityananda Prabhu, discussed in the 5th chapter of this Hari Lila, that enabled him to go to Vrindavan. What happened to him when he went there? And as we heard from the introductory verse, Sanskrit verse of his own composition, what happened, he alludes there to the fact that a fool, as he refers to himself, like himself, can become a dancing dog under the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and write about him. So he's going to tell about how he came to write about him in this extraordinary text, Caitanya Caritamrta. But preceding that, he is in the midst here in the early part of the chapter. It's a short chapter, in the midst of a carryover from the previous chapter, which is dealing with the Panchatattva. So carryover in that he continues to glorify the Panchatattva. And we heard last night, I think we concluded with the verse where he said that by their grace, Mukha Kovita Kori, Yan Shabar Smarani, Hondu Giri Langhe, Andadeki Paragone. So, by their grace, difficult things become easy. He says a lame person can, with a big walk, can climb a mountain. And one who's dumb cannot speak, illiterate, as well, he implies, can become a poet. And a blind man can see stars in a distant galaxy. Better than with the Hubble telescope. So he's tried to give some examples to help us understand how he personally feels. What the influence of this fivefold manifestation of divinity, the Panchatattva, a doctrine, an idea, perhaps begun by Tripurari Swami. In fact, his verse that the previous chapter is based upon and is an explanation of is a verse composed originally by Tripurari Swami. So the doctrine within Gaudiya Vaishnavism of the Panchatattva seems to have stemmed from him, and it's further played out here in this book and in this chapter. Again, the carryover from the previous chapter and an ongoing and continued glorification of the Panchatattva. Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Radha Shiva Vrinda. So he goes on, he says, Eshab Namani Ye Pandit Sakal Tasavad Vidyapata Vek Kulahal. I think we might have read this verse last night as well. He says, Eshab Namani Ye Pandit Sakal. Those who are educated, cultured people, and the very education that they learned people culture, that education and educated people who consider themselves as such, but at the same time do not believe in the statements this Prabhupada kind of adds this in, the statements of the Caitanya Caritamrta and Namane Ye Pandit Sakal. They don't accept what he said, really, thus far. They are strong statements about the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what they can do. I mean, obviously, we don't see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turning deaf people into poets. We don't see him turning lame people into track stars and so forth. He's just given these examples. To take someone from this world to Brajalila is certainly quite a much greater of a task and accomplishment. And Krishnadas is considering himself in his humility. He really is the standard of humility in Caitanya Caritamrta, a book in which, in the final chapter, as we know, where the Shikshastakam appears, Srimad Mahaprabhu does give a mandate as to the decorum of his devotees, and he gives the 4 regulative principles. There to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, expect no honor for yourself, and give honor to others. This is the decorum of how the devotees should conduct themselves in the context of chanting, whereby, he says, quickly then one will attain prema. So one has to pass through this or decorate oneself in this way. And that humility is often highlighted. It's said in Bengal that, I wanted to be a follower of Caitanya and taste the Radha Prem. But then I heard this verse, one has to be more humble than a blade of grass, and I knew it was impossible. And so it's a big thing. It's small to be humble in comparison to the attaining of prem, but it's part of the course and difficult for most people. But there's much, of course, positive impetus for that, and the example of Krishnadas Kaviraj himself is considerable in this regard. If we have examples of persons, it helps, obviously, and we don't meet him personally here tonight, but his writing really does, in certain places, give us entrance into a glimpse into what he's like, how he personally feels with regard to the humility, that he is kind of the standard bearer, or the poster boy for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He had made the famous statement that that I myself am lower than a worm in the stool, and anyone who hears my name loses their piety. Anybody who chants my name becomes impious. He really felt this way about himself. It's very extraordinary. Of course, it is part of the dynamics of the meeting, the union, the coming together of the finite and the infinite. After all, if we come in touch as finite beings with the infinite, we're going to feel what it's like to be finite in a way that we could not otherwise in the face of the infinite. One feels small, and one feels also not only small, but one feels the infinite, in this case, infinite love, infinite affection, and the capacity to reciprocate seems to be very limited in comparison. This is the real experience of making spiritual progress. I've given an example before that if you're out in Saragrahi walking around trying to figure out the whole place and its various valleys and hills and so forth, and if you were to fall into an old well, you never know what you'll find out there. We found a still out there the other day for making liquor. An old one.
Mountain Dew,
yeah. So if you should fall into an old dried up well in the forest covered by leaves, then how will you get out? Right? Because the walls are steep, there's nothing to hold on to. So you have to chant, you have to call out in hopes that someone will hear you. And if they do, of course, they come and then they put together a rope and throw you the rope and tell you to hang on to the rope. So you hold on to the rope and they pull you out. And when you get to the top, you don't say, well, I really held that rope pretty good, didn't I? That's not the experience. Although you did, you had to do that. You had to make that effort. But you feel only that you have been saved by someone. So the point I'm making is that we do make effort. Effort and grace are both required. Grace is indeed the opportunity even to make an effort. Grace is required. The opportunity before us to try for, if you will, and try, of course, and you will be successful. Even at first, if at first you don't seem to succeed. So my point is that the effort never comes even close to equaling what speak of outweighing the result. This is the experience. So when you get this little glimpse of what is bhakti, even what is the atma, even what is the sattva guna, the real experience of sattva. The sattva guna, for example, is knowledge. Sattva guna, you can experience this self-realization is accomplished in sattva guna. Brahman realization, which is another thing, liberation, that's transcendental. But even the realization of the self, like a Socrates, he can do this This is explained by Sanatana Swami. He acknowledges this in his great Caritamrta commentary. So he acknowledges it in relation to bhakti. And he says, so even if we admit that you can attain self-realization without bhakti, so what? It's not a very big thing anyway. It's no big accomplishment. It doesn't even free you from the cycle of birth and death. That means you have to attain Brahman in the least, from Sayuja. And that requires some element of bhakti. And that's a small thing. Liberation is a small thing. Speak of self-realization, even. This is a very peculiar, if you will, doctrine of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, one of the many peculiar. I mean, it turns kind of the religious world on its head over and over again. This is an example of that. Makes self-realization a trifling thing that is can be accomplished by the influence of Sattva-guna. And they give all the scriptural support for this. They're the Nana Shastra Vicharana Kanipuno Sadharma Samastapako Lokanam Mitakarano Tinubone. I remember when I was very young and reading Prabhupada's books, and I would think, man, how many books has he read? He quotes all these books here. This Tantra and that Sutra and this Purana and so forth. Later, of course, I realized that the harder work, if you will, was done by the Goswamis, who wrote the original Bhakti Shastras and drew all these references from the entire body of the sacred text. I mean, their knowledge of it for bhaktas, who are thought by the Gyanis to be rather more emotional than they are intellectual. Their knowledge is considerable. I told a story how once I was giving a talk, and there were some yoga students and whatnot. And after the talk, one fellow said, "You know, for a Janana, you sure got a lot of bhakti."
Oh my God.
For a Janana, you got a lot of bhakti. I said, "It's bhakti, but yeah." Yeah, so it's pronounced Gyan, not Janana, something. So, yeah, devotees, they're not fools, is the point. Prabhupada used to say, "What do you think we were worshiping some stone after writing and reading all these, these books?" And a lot of them. So the Goswamis, they did this very hard work, really, if you will, academic work, of drawing from the standard of knowledge at the time and establishing their position, which is really obviously the position of, to say obviously, it's obvious because we've read their commentaries, the position of the Bhagavatam. And not how you could miss this. It's when you read it, you think, how could anybody miss it? But we only see it because of the Goswamis. So many obvious things in the Bhagavatam, like the very idea that the Bhagavatam is what they say it is, which is what the Bhagavatam says. It's the last word of Vyasa, the final word. It's the book where bhakti is emphasized by the legendary, from the traditional perspective, author, editor of all the sacred texts. This is the text in which bhakti is emphasized in no uncertain terms, and that under the mandate, by the mandate of Vyasa's own guru, Narada, to make clear the efficacy of bhakti, that bhakti might be highlighted and it might be made clear that the value in jnana, in karma, in yoga, is really only as much as they themselves are connected with bhakti. If you have, for example, tributaries coming from a glacier on the Himalayas, that Gyan and Vairagya, for example, yoga, they're like that. They're tributaries, but they don't have the power under themselves to reach the Bay of Bengal, to reach the ocean. But if they could connect with the Ganga, then it's possible. So Gyan vairagya, if they connect, if they're harmonized with bhakti, then they have efficacy. And it might sound like a sectarian statement on the part of bhaktas, but it's very, very, very well reasoned and established, if you will, in terms of the standard of knowledge of the time on the part of the Goswamis. And therefore we call their original works often the Bhakti Shastras. I mean, you can't find a book on Bhakti like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It makes the Narad Bhakti Sutras that Rupa defers to in his humility insignificant, really, in comparison to the depth to which Rupa Goswami has plumbed, the ocean of bhakti and bhakti rasa, and they come up to the surface to explain it. It's an extraordinary contribution. And this is what Vyas felt undone about, having compiled all the texts. And you have the sections on karma, you have the sections on gyan. These are the two sides, right? For exploitation of the world, for renunciation of the world. One is overtly material, the other is overtly spiritual. The overtly material side is all the procedures involved in material acquisition, elaborate as they are at times. And then the other side, you have an obvious, if you will, materialism, and then you have the obvious, apparently obvious spiritualism, where as much as spiritualism spirituality is thought to be the antithesis of materialism, of which there is some truth. But you have your naked sadhus, and they're wearing, dressed in ashes comparatively. And then you have this bhakti idea. It takes a little bit to figure out, because it's not so flashy in either way. In other words, karma is very flashy. There's a lot going on. There's something happening there. There's buildings, there's people, there's excitement, there's restaurants, there's a pizza place. If your temple is, well, I'll give you an example of that. Yeah, it's flashy. And Gyan is flashy also. Oh, he's standing on one leg. He's there for all this time. Whoa, he's lying on a bed of nails. Bhakti is just like, you could miss it. It can be misconstrued for just part of karma. A little upasana, like you worship different gods in the karma marga, you can worship Krishna also. And devotees have things, and so it's therefore Vaishnava Mukod Putam Harikatam. What is it? That's another verse. Anyway.
Vaishnava Kriya Mudra.
It's difficult to understand the motive of a Vaishnava. Who is a Vaishnava? When they appear very ordinary. And what are we advocating, after all? Karma is advocating acquisition, exploitation of nature, and so forth. And Gyan is advocating the renunciation. And these are the two tracks on which the world runs, Bhog and Tyag. And we're emphasizing service. Is that all? What do you get for it? From karma, you get something. From renunciation, you get something. What do you get from service? More service. Sure, I'm interested in that. It's not very flashy. To be a servant. Of course, never mind, it solves all the problems. The problems are the pursuit of things, and the problem that results from pursuing things results in wanting to give them up. You struggle to get something, and then you have to try to keep it, and it's problematic. Gyanis, they don't want to have anything to do with that. So you can't give a Gyani new shoes. No, he won't take, because he knows, at least in India, someone will steal them anyway. So forget them. I'll start thinking about them, and they will be lost, and then I'll feel upset and so forth. So anyway, this is the world, right? It moves in this way, Bhog and Tyag, Bhog and Tyag. And so we try to acquire happiness through acquisition, and then we try to acquire happiness by getting rid of the things that we've acquired or avoiding things. But in service, properly understood, the problem is solved. Because in service, it doesn't matter whether it's a rainy or a sunny day. It really doesn't matter. It's just another day to serve. Please your master. That's what you do. That's all. I've told the story. One of our workers in Madhava, a fellow was born there, Juan, and came to work one day, and I had him digging trenches to bury water pipe the day before. I thought that was pretty hard work, so maybe I'll give him something a little easier to do today. And so I said, Juan, I'll give you something a little easier because you were digging trenches. He said to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He says, my job is not digging trenches or picking flowers. My job is pleasing you. That's what it is. If I please you, but then that's all it matters. It doesn't matter if it's a hard work or easy work. It properly understood. The point is, it solves the whole problem of material existence. Everything is then seen. Every difficulty is just seen as another opportunity to serve in a different way. So they have the service disposition, ego. And that is basic to bhakti. That's why we say, in consideration of the varnashram, from the bhakti perspective, the best position is the Sudra, because he knows, she knows, I'm a servant. Then you accept to say, put him, serve Krishna. You got the ego for serving the Brahmins. Nothing, do nothing. You do nothing. It's a different way of looking at it, obviously. I'm just saying, from the point of view of the serving attitude. So, bhakti, it's not very flashy. We do bhakti for more bhakti. When the inhabitants of Vrindavan asked Krishna, what will we be in our next life? He showed, same, no difference. You'll be in Golok with your cows. They were happy with that. It's a lesson. Bhakti for bhakti's sake. So it's not overtly, doesn't stand out like karma or gyan with its rewards. I've told the story how I was once in recent years in India, and I had met a fellow, I hadn't seen him in a long time. He said, Maharaj, I understand you have ashram in California now. And I said, yes. He said, where is that? He said, it's in Philo. Where is that? So I said, it's near San Francisco. Oh, San Francisco, yeah. It's a big city, center there. Not really. I'm like 3 hours from there in the forest, But I didn't get into that with him. And he said, how many devotees you have there now? I said, 3. And then he felt, he started to blush. And, I've embarrassed Maharaj. He really has a real small program there. There's nothing going on there. There's not a lot of people there. So, and you see this, once they get enough people, then people, all kinds of people, I want to be part of the group. So this bhakti, we come to bhakti from one of these two tracks, or a combination of both karma and jnana. We come, and we carry those ideas. Therefore, Rupa Goswami has defined marginally bhakti as, is uttam bhakti as what? Gyan karmadi anavritam. Free from gyan, free from karma. But we see many devotees that they don't understand this point very well. And people in general, if something's happening, there's a lot of devotees there, must be the place to be. Something happened, something has been acquired. They've got buildings, they've got properties, they've got people. Or on the other side, well, no, I'm living alone under a rock. I eat only tulsi leaves on the Goddessy. Whoa. Something's happening there. So wherever bhakti is going on, being small, there's no it's big, right? Purely. Mm. One of my godbrothers once told Agni Dev, my friend, who was another godbrother of mine, that who was famous for opening this Govinda's restaurant. I think he must have opened the first Govinda's restaurant, or popularized it anyway, which is an idea that Prabhupada had wanted, suggested, that there would be like reading rooms and prasadam restaurants throughout the country, something like that. He kind of took that to heart, and he was off in some distant place where there was no temple with the society that he was officially a member of, and who listed in their magazine his location. You know, we've got a temple here, a restaurant here, and so forth. And so we were old friends, and I wasn't in that institution at the time, and I'm not now, but he maintained a relationship with me. And indeed, I was traveling through the area, and he said, "Marge, why don't you start a temple here?" And so, on the basis of his invitation, I did. There wasn't another temple. There was not another temple there. So, anyway, the word got out that he was affiliated with me, and that I had started a temple. I said, "We got a call from somebody in his institution," and he said that we might have to take your name of your restaurant, your address, out of our listing of our locations. And he said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Well, because the word is you're affiliated with the Maharaj, Swami, Swami Tripurari over there." And so they had a little discussion. And Agni told me this, and he said that he said to this other fellow who was a sannyasi that he likes association, it's good. He's doing the same things that the other group is organized to do, and so on and so forth. What's the problem? And we got some lame excuse, and then the fellow said, "Well, anyway," he said something to the effect, "if he ever becomes big, and really has a big thing or something like that, then we might have to recognize him." And Agni just cracked up. He said, "Maharaj, it's not about how big you are, it's how pure you are. It doesn't matter." It's like he had this like real cutting, just real like common sense spiritual understanding, and then there was silence on the other end. They didn't take his name out of the magazine, as it turned out. So, I mean, that's not to say I'm a very pure person, but Agni has a pure heart, so he was thinking about me in that way. But at any rate, bhakti is not so easy to understand, even for people who dress and decorate themselves as such. After compiling all the Vedic literatures, Vyasa was told by Narada, "Look, you haven't done it such a way that without that people can be confused about what the full play, if you will, of spirituality is in bhakti." So Bhagavatam, right? He reworked the whole text. Samadhi nusmrata vicheshchitam. Narada told him, "Go and sit, you're qualified in samadhi." And from there, you're right. And his samadhi is described in the Bhagavatam. There, that a whole Achinta Veda comes out, and so forth. And so he wrote the Bhagavatam. And still, what we have with the Goswamis, of course, is they're drawing from the Bhagavatam and making this point that Narada told Vyasa to make even more emphatically. What is the central position of bhakti? How liberation of any kind is only possible with an admixture, in the least, of bhakti. And what is the full scope of what can be attained by Uttam Bhakti, Anulay Bhakti. And to do that, they drew from so many texts. They were very, very learned. For bhaktis, they had a lot of jnana, right? So devotees aren't fools. As Prabhupada said, I think I cited it earlier, we're not like worshiping a stone after reading all these books. And this is our conclusion, we're just going to worship a stone. You have to look at it a little differently. And this was, of course, the sacred texts of the Hindus were the standard of knowledge at the time. So Goswamis did their work and then some. And Srinivas describes him this way. And what was the motive? Lokanam hitakaram. They had out of compassion. This is the way in which Sukadev or Sutta Goswami describes Sukadev. Puranaya Puranaguyam. He tells the sages, Sutta says, Sukadev, he spoke this Purana out of compassion for others, with no personal motive. So Lokanam Hitakarano, Lokanam Hitakarano, they cared for the people of the world. So they made this effort, academic effort, to demonstrate what is bhakti. And then in the context of that, it's very beautiful what they did, because they established what is bhakti. Then in the context of that, where bhakti is most fully expressed in the person of Radha, in relation to Krishna, perfect object of love, differing between Narayan and so many avatars and so forth in consideration of rasa vichar. And then after having done that in the way in which they did, if you look at it carefully, you look at Krishna, keep looking, and then you see, oh, there's someone next to him, Radha. And that she becomes more important than Krishna. Bhakti to Krishna is more important than Krishna. Then you keep looking at Radha and Krishna through the eyes of the Goswamis. Keep looking. Then you start to see a third figure, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The way they have explained the Leela in the center of the Bhagavatam, Rasa Panchajaya, there you find the opening. You find the Vrindavan landscape parts, and there's another Leela inside of it. It's the logical conclusion. I mean, what I'm saying is they cited different scriptures and so forth to establish bhakti, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and so forth. This is very academic work. And some of those citations could be interpreted other ways, perhaps, but they really explain the psychology of Krishna with his inner and esoteric kind of how do you say, existential crisis like questions of God. It's an incredible idea. And there, if you understand the purpose, there has to be another. Krishna has to do something about it. He wants to understand by direct experience the love of Radha. There must be another Leela. So very extraordinary work that they did. Very subtly, they explained about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Here, Krishnadas, their followers coming out like a needle. They went out like a plow. He's coming very strongly here. You'll see he's making statements about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, speaking the way the Goswamis never would, but which is the implication of what they have said. If you're going to start a sampradaya, you have to see, how far you can go at the time. So again, Prabhupada's adage, in like a needle, it's a very small hole, and out like a plow. Two sides, make a big hole coming out. So that's what he's going to do here. He's starting to do it in this chapter. And he has said here just now, he said that educated and learned people, they don't believe the statements of Chaitanya Caritamrta. And what does he say about them? That he says, therefore I compare them to croaking frogs. He's not a very complimentary person. He tends to be much more gentle than Vrindavan Das, whom he will defer to in this chapter. His predecessor, who wrote what was called the Chaitanya Mangal at that time, later was renamed as the Chaitanya Bhagavat, who is very outspoken in his language, while Krishnadas is the standard of humility, saying, As I said earlier, one who chants my name becomes impious. One who hears it loses his piety. I'm so low. He actually felt this way. He felt humble. He had real contact with the infinite. He felt small in size and small in measure of capacity to give affection and love in comparison to Krishna. So he's very naturally, this is a natural result of one's spiritual progress, humbled and at the same time here in this chapter, he's speaking in a way that's almost like uncharacteristic, very strong. But he has deep feeling behind this, conviction. He's just passed through 7 chapters of very complex theological arguments and explanations and philosophy, and a whole dissertation on Mayavad here, which is passed in chapter 7. So he's shown we're not fools. There's educated people who don't believe these things, and we consider them like croaking frogs. Frogs croak. The idea is in the night, and they croak in the night, and they invite the snake finds out where they are as a result, and then devours them. Or Prabhupada's classical Dr. Frog philosophy that one frog went hop, hop, hop to the ocean, came back hop, hop, hop to the puddle where the frogs were living and said, I have seen a puddle that is bigger than this puddle. And the first frog said, well, how big? Is it twice as big? No. 3 times as big? 4 times? No, you cannot measure it. It's immeasurable. I've seen the immeasurable puddle, and I've come back to croak about it, but I can't. My croaking will not do justice. And the other frogs just croak. It's not going to be a puddle so much bigger than the realm of my experience and so forth. So it's like, the idea is, it's like a modern educated person on the strength of their intellect alone, enamored by it, a slave of it, its limitations, thinking that they can master the world, so to speak, only to find there are other worlds inside of whatever black holes and universes and parallel, whatever they'll find out there. Intellect is a very, very small thing in the face of the vastness of the material nature. Bhagavatam doesn't get into describing material nature in any detail, but it describes it comprehensively as something that should be transcended. It should be invested in such a way that it results in realization of the subjective element of you, of yourself, of consciousness. So, obviously, we are theists, and we speak about the immeasurable. And modern educated people who are not theistic, kind of what's being talked about here, are very fond of measuring. This is what science is about. Math is for measurement, is described through measurement. So we're measuring the world. We get certain results by measuring it, and then we make conclusions based on the measurements. And because we get pretty good results, then we start to get really intoxicated about our capacity to measure. It's interesting to note, of course, the Sanskrit word Maya also means to measure. There is something, the point is, that is immeasurable. And it's you even. You are immeasurable. You are the measurer. The ruler can't measure itself, so consciousness is the measurer, actually. But if it spends its time simply measuring matter, some part of matter, you measure some part of matter, observe it, measure it, you get consistent data. And with the data, you do something magical. You make a computer, a cell phone, you make a satellite, and all these wonderful accomplishments and so forth that lead us to the very inflated, intoxicated notion that we're arriving at comprehensive knowing, despite the fact that we're becoming more and more dissatisfied as a people, modern people, more and more. I mean, you look at the country, they're just all everybody at odds with one another over the smallest things, and somebody says something and then on the TV, and then they take it out of context and blow it up, and it's Kali Yuga. I mean, you can debate all you want about the empirical reality of the Kali Yuga, but at the heart of what it's described, how it's described, the age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and so it really fits the bill in the times in which we live, the time of argument, they say, hypocrisy, and so forth. So while the propaganda, if you will, is that we're on the verge of knowing everything. We haven't got anywhere near the kind of knowledge that will inform the action that will make us perfectly happy. It will make us feel that we don't need to know anything else. This is the idea of bhakti. The kind of knowledge you get is the knowledge, the knowing this. There's nothing else that needs to be known. There are many factoids that you could figure out, and ways in which you could manipulate the material nature to accomplish this, that, the other thing, but all of it pales in comparison to just knowing what I am as a unit from the measuring world that can't be itself measured, quantified. This is the beginning experience from Bhakti. So this is what he's saying here. It's a very really, I mean, he's saying it in a very kind of crass way, but it's a very good argument. And we see people, it's unfortunate, it's very painful. I'm not the dumbest person out there. And I see people intoxicated by their intelligence. I find it's very painful and very, very, very unbecoming. It's such a small thing. And to think you've sorted through Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's really, this is what he's saying here. This is deep, really deep stuff. And you can have a superficial understanding of, get involved on a superficial level, not have really perhaps a teacher that can take you deeply into it. The teacher should take you into it in such a way that you always feel like, whoa, it's like, I didn't know that. There's always something, not like, oh God, I know that. Okay. But keep the tradition alive and compelling and so forth. I mean, it's an exciting journey. This is, and it's, as I say, many traditions stop where this really begins. We have just relegated, and based on the sacred texts, self-realization to the sattva guna. Tell it to the self-realization fellowship. Autobiography of a book. No. A yogi. Some kind of yogi. If yoga is not for Kali Yuga, then the Prabhupada would say, why are you doing yoga? It's Kali Yuga. And he would say, yeah, that's true, it's Kali Yuga. And according to the sacred text, Nam Sankirtan is the way. This is not like our sectarian idea. When Mahaprabhu revealed, when he spoke to Prakashananda in the previous chapter, Prakashananda said, look, you're a sannyasi, what are you doing? Sannyasa dharma is to study the Vedanta, and you're singing and dancing. He said, well, he very nicely told my guru, told me I couldn't study Vedanta. He told me just to chant Krishna Nam and Krishna mantra, and this is what happened to me. I went mad, and I dance and fall on the ground and so forth. And and they were attracted. He created a teachable moment, and then he began to explain, of course, what should have been so obvious to Prakashananda. It's Kali Yuga, the Yuga Dharma, according to all the text, is Nam Kirtan. That's what we're doing. What are you doing? Studying the Vedanta. What yuga are you in? Is the kind of the response that he gave. And very nicely, very humbly, he did it in a very unassuming way. So, yeah, self-realization. It's a small thing, comparatively, obviously. What to speak then of material accomplishment, and we, also obviously, we are Vaishnavas. We live in the world. We appreciate the accomplishments of the technological world to a point. We bow to them to an extent, but we have another altar, and it's not on our altar. We concur with it. We find things in it that sometimes can be used to make arguments for our own case, and sometimes we'll dismiss it as an overall approach to arriving at comprehensive knowing. And that, in our estimation, is the kind of knowing that informs action. All action is informed by some type of knowledge. So the kind of knowledge that informs action, by which one becomes actually perfectly happy, content, and feels, I don't need to know anything else. What kind of knowledge is that? That you could, that all the gizmos and gadgets of the world that make life easier, they're all relative to our bodily and psychological orientation. And they have no purchasing power, no interest for those who have internal life. And internal life, take the internal life. I mean, we were talking about the other day, if some of them can make the argument that, okay, so you got this internal meditative life, right? And you're exploring and experiencing some dimension of consciousness that ordinary people are not. But what you say it is, you think you experience that you're eternal, that you will survive death, and so on and so forth. We just don't buy that. It's okay that you're having a deep experience, but from our point of view, I heard this one fellow say, we tested this yogi. He was living in the cave, and there he was living there for 30 years. No need to go anywhere. Seemed pretty happy, pretty content. Of course, he didn't know what was really going on with him. We put things on his head, and we could figure out what was going on. This was happening. This was happening. This was happening. And I was just chuckled when I heard, you don't know what's really happening. What is it? Get in and have the experience. So you can make light of it and try to reduce it to something less than what the person who experienced it says it is. And you can say, how can we trust your experience? It's not something that can be proved objectively. And not too many people are having it that we could get some intersubjective, cross-reference. She's experienced it, he's experienced it. Maybe we can gather a few mystics, and okay, but still, how do we know what you're reporting isn't just a hallucination? Well, that's fine. You can make that argument. We could reply, that's fine. You can make that argument. But how do we know that what you're experiencing? The whole basis of modern science is it proceeds on the basis of a faith that a belief that there is an external world to poke around in and to examine. You cannot demonstrate that conclusively. You cannot empirically prove that there is an external world. There's the famous story of Berkeley. Bishop Berkeley was the famous idealist who, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, how do you know? I forget the guy who was arguing with him, and he got so ticked off at the end, he just kicked a big rock and said, like as if to say, see, there is a world out there, ouch! And he hurt his foot, and and Berkeley just went. It's your imagination. So you can't, anyway, the point is, it's a belief. It's a belief. Modern science proceeds on the basis of a belief that there is a world out there. Now, that aside, meditation proceeds on the fact that there is an experiencer. What you experience may not be provable or it may not be true, but the fact that you experience, that can never be denied. I mean, how can you deny that you can say the words, there's no experience, but I mean, it doesn't, you can say a square is, is round also, but it doesn't make any sense. One cannot deny experience. It's the basis of reality. When, said it before, when Bertrand Russell wrote his famous explanation of matter, he came to the conclusion, the only thing we really know is our own consciousness. If anything's even out there, we don't really know it in a definitive way. So the whole scientific edifice is based on this belief. It's funny how they turn things around, right? The religious life and the meditative life is based on faith. It's actually proceeds on the basis of the reality, the fact that we experience. What we experience may be false, but that we experience is not false. So we should have a technology for pursuing that, not for denying it, trying to reduce it to a world that we can't even prove exists. The physical world. And anyway, even if you could demonstrate that the mystic's experience is all in their head, right? Still, it's the most desirable thing. In other words, if there is only a physical world and it's just happening in the brain, you go through all this trouble to meditate and start to think that you're eternal and feel like you're eternal, and you start feeling love for all beings, and you become what an illusion. You become compassionate, kind to everyone. You have no needs. You have no economic, problems. You have no problem with the environment. You're not taking from it, or in such a limited way that there's no question if it's being exploited and abused, overindulged in. Political problems are solved. I mean, truly, economic, political, social, environmental, all the problems are solved. He loves all beings. I mean, isn't that what everybody's trying to arrive at anyway? By different methodologies that in and of themselves don't even say that they could really attain that, but to whatever extent they do, they're virtuous. Everybody wants their kids to be a sadhu, really. And then we take some discipline by which they become fair. They learn to be fair, to be honest, to be kind, not to steal, and all these things, and all these impossible things to do perfectly. The mystic does this. And so even if it's only in your head, it's still the best headspace to be in, and it solves all the problems of the world. So there's really no getting around it. And of course, if they were to prove, right, that it's only going on in the brain, then we'd say, okay, well, it's a pretty good, it's the best space to be in, and there's Krishna Leela's there. It's as real as anything else, which is all in your head, right? Which is their argument, right? They're all in your brain. So point here, as we're just going off a little bit, but this is not a doctrine that's not well thought out. And as far as internal life and ecstasy, there is no one religious figure in the world whose example exceeds that of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's not a sectarian statement. I mean, you can read, you can study about the Catholic saints and so forth, and I don't want to take anything away from the Buddhist mystics and the Sufis and so forth. They're all extraordinary people of great significant experience. But Caitanya Mahaprabhu, what the eyewitnesses are saying, nobody says that. the Goswamis took bhakti, and then they played out what is bhakti to its fullest measure, and they come to the Mahabhav, Madanakya Mahabhav of Radha, and they find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the embodiment of that in this world, and they're trying to explain what that is. And you know, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a whole, you can use the word ecstasy, and then you want to say, if somebody says, have you ever tasted ecstasy? You say, well, which kind are you talking about? Anubhavs, Sattvika Bhavs, Sthayi Bhavs, this Bhav, that Bhav. You know? Is it Bhava Bhas you want to talk about? Which type of Bhava Bhas? Chai Bhava Bhas, or you know, this type of Bhava? Like, whoa, you know. It's like somebody says our guru is incarnation of God. We say, which kind is it? Is it Shakti Besh Avatar, Vinavatar, Nilavatar? You know, you go on the whole. This is the Goswami's, you know, contribution. It's immense. Their knowledge, their fund of knowledge is super extraordinary. And as I said, that's how we got off into this topic about, you know, reading Prabhupada's books. I thought, holy cow, like, how many books has he read? Where did he get these references from? Later on, I realized Goswamis did the hard work. Prabhupada's, of course, reading their books and quoting them, and as he should, carrying on the tradition and so forth accurately, as Krishnadas is here. Every chapter is praising the Goswamis. Everything is coming from them. He's citing the verses in the way they translated them, the way they understood them, the way they explained, and their own verses, and so on and so forth. It means that these young girls, this is what we're talking about. Vrindavan, Radha, milkmaidens, apparently uneducated girls of Vrindavan, not even old enough to be very educated, right? The handmaidens of Radha. In Vrindavan, this is how they're portrayed, right? When they come here, in Sadhakadeyas, as Rup, Sanatan, Raghunath Das, Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, what kind of knowledge they have? Pujapachita Maharaj gave an example. The United States is the largest military industrial complex in the world. During the Cold War, it was a question of who had more missiles and whatnot and armaments than Russia or America. So during the national holidays, the Russians would have parades with missiles and tanks and showing the force of their armaments. And in the United States, when they have festivals, there's music and bands, and you never see any guns or, you know, tanks, missiles, and so on and so forth. So that was their power, the United States' power, that they didn't have to show them. They were all kept away, hidden in hidden caves and places like that, in order for the peaceful commerce exchange amongst people to go on. They were so protected that they didn't have to flash these missiles around and say, we're strong. You know, they had them hidden, and the people just going on as if they have, you know, no army. You don't see them anywhere. Where's the army? You know, you see army guys, you know, in a uniform. It's a rare thing. When was the last time you saw a soldier?
In the airport.
Yeah, in the airport, somewhere passing through, but not very often, right? Right. So, but the point is, if the country is attacked, they come out from everywhere. All of a sudden, you know, there's martial law, and they're everywhere. So he was explaining Vrindavan is like that. In the grains of sand, there is more knowledge than you know, every university put together could come up with a million to the millionth power. But it's all in the background. It's in the ground, the knowledge, because knowledge is an opulence, an aishvarya, and this is a madhurya, a sweet lila. So your knowledge has to be subsumed under the influence of love and affection. Therefore, Krishna can be unknowing. Unknowing. Does Radha love me or not? Some unknowing. His unknowing is a greater knowing than the omniscience of Narayan. It's a greater knowing because that unknowing is more pleasing, and knowledge is going to be valued on a scale of in which we measure the extent to which the knowledge again informs action by which we become happy. The unknowing of Krishna is making him so happy. The more he knows, the more alone he is. The less he knows, the closer he can get to everyone. This is the Vrindavan Leela, so close to him, everyone. And so knowledge has to be totally suppressed and put in the background. But if the young girls from there who love him so much, if they come here in Sadhaka Day, as we see, oh, they have so much knowledge. Their knowledge of the sacred text, which is the standard of knowledge, is immeasurable. It's staggering. They're not jnanis, they're bhaktas. Point is, and Krishna's making this in a rather crass way by saying there are educated people that don't believe in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but I consider their talks like the croaking of frogs only. But he has reason to say that he's not a fool. I mean, I said he himself is a scholar. This is a scholarly book. And it's not just, well, he only knows Bengali, doesn't know Sanskrit. Obviously, he has his own Sanskrit compositions. He's did a Sanskrit commentary on Govinda Lila, on Bilamangal Thakur's book, Krishna Karnamrita. He wrote the Govinda Lila Amrita. I mean, he is a great scholar himself, a theologian of the times. And he believes in these things, what Raghunath Das Swami wrote in his notes and his prayers about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The power of the Panchatattva. He's experiencing it. And so he makes a strong statement, but you have to understand the background. From where he's standing, he is standing on the shore of a kind of knowing that has the capacity to make one so happy. That, as I say, all the knowledge of the material world, you multiply it out full, it just looks like ignorance to him. It's the apara vidya, whatever. It's not making anyone happy. Yes, what are you talking about, Swami? You know what the duration of life is in the United States now? Well, for some middle-aged white people, it's not so great, I've heard, but ours was telling me, but overall, over the last century, lifespan has been extended. So people aren't happy. They're happy they've got a longer life. No, they're not. Extending that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived for 48 years. Shankar lived for 32 years. Jesus was not an old person. Length of life, 34, he was Jesus. How happy they were. How happy they were. They didn't need anything. They were only givers. How full they were. It's the quality of the life. And what is the quality of the life? If it's based on the idea that by material acquisition, the acquisition of material knowledge by which we can acquire more things, we become happy. It's not happening. It's not happening. More information, more details about how nature moves and so forth. We're using this just to counteract problem, create more sunny days, less rainy days, solve the drought, this, that. I mean, these things are at best going to make you bodily, comfortable, relatively speaking, a more easier lifestyle than a sustenance, hunter-gatherer struggle. True. Now they said the first 1,000-year-old person has already been born. These are the claims from some of the medical quarters. Just see. And Krishna is saying, listen, tell it to Brahma, okay? 1,000 years is like nothing. by contrast, Mamu Peti Kunte Punarjanmana. He says, look, 1,000 years, good. But Brahma lives 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 years. And even if you don't believe he lives, you don't believe in Brahma, he says, what I'm saying to you, you can live as long as a Brahma. The number exists, and you can live that many years, and it's not going to save you from dying. And then you're going to say, I don't know, if I wish I could die, and now they fix me and I can't. And I want to get, it's too much, and who knows. But Krishna said, but the Punarjanmanabhajite, Mamu Pecha, but come to me, and never take birth again. There is such a thing as eternity, and you can experience it. And this is no big mystery. People now, what is his name, that commentator, he liked to do interviews, like interview who was the
Moyers? Bill Moyers?
Bill Moyers. Yeah, there you go. Bill Moyers. He said that the challenge of the 21st century is to define the spiritual. What is spiritual? I'm thinking it's been defined a long time ago, Bill. And let me give you a basic description that everybody who has seriously in the history, seriously taken to some form of sadhana with its salt, its ego effacing, has had experience that they are eternal. This is the beginning. This is the beginning, that I'm eternal. Now you can't say, what can you say about that? How can you? Like one of my godbrothers, Gopal Bhatti, he said, I saw him, I don't know, a decade ago. I trained him up years ago, so he was always appreciative. He was a hard one to work with, and he knew it too. So we had a fun relationship. But he told me, he said, Maharaj, he said, I know that I'm eternal. I know that I'm eternal. I could appreciate it. He said, but now how do I know that Krishna is God? So of course, I gave him an explanation. He did appreciate it, but I appreciated the point he was making. I know that I'm eternal. I've had the experience that I'm eternal. So Sat, Chit, and we've been saying it for thousands and thousands of years. And these terms are not like relative to a particular culture or a sectarian perspective. They really do very beautifully define the basic nature of the Atma and of the Godhead. There's a fellow Christian theologian, what is the name of his book? The God, Experience of God.
Experience of God.
Being, knowing, and bliss, or something like that. So he came to the conclusion that the best generic terms or description of God is what the Hindus have come up with, Sat Chit Ananda. Being, knowing, the nature of consciousness. Being here means not subject to transformation, not subject to death or birth and so forth. Anyone can experience this, right? Have you experienced it? You know that you're eternal. There's a kind of knowing. What can you say to people? I mean, how can you even talk about it? You just like nod and go, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's good, and it's good. And this is just a little glimpse of this. Makes the whole world seem very pale. All its colors, they're pale. They're like watercolors, and it's raining. It's some tears of what it means to know I'm eternal. If you knew the extent to which you existed, all fears, all anxieties, and washed away forever, and you just begun your journey into Caitanya Caritamrta. It is Caitanya Caritamrta, the immortal nectar of the character of consciousness. It's just not like it's just doesn't die, but that's just like, well, that's just the beginning. So much more to be said, and he knows this. And his deity, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is his book, Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. the immortal, the nectar, immortal, the nectarian character of consciousness in immortality. The fact that it's immortal is just the beginning. What is its character in immortality? Its nature, the possibilities. This is what his deity embodies. Not just this basic idea there's a difference between matter and consciousness. So much more. He knows this. And so he's trying to shake us a little bit and share his faith with us. He does it in a rather crass way. He says, "Well, those who think they know something, but they don't believe in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what I've said about him thus far." He says, "I think that's like the croaking of frogs only." You might want to think, "Oh God, this guy's too much. What? He's insulting people." There's so many educated, thoughtful people. You're going to even weighing in on what life means, and you are so proud to say you know so well that you could call them all just croaking frogs. Of course, his example is there as a person too. That might be worth examining. He's not just speaking; he's walking what he's talking about, and his example is extraordinary. And humbly, he's telling, gives us a glimpse into his life. We'll hear something about it. So, from Bhava, he's speaking, and he thinks material knowing is ignorance. To see somebody, you have to understand, intellect is not the way to go there. It has its place. It has to be used, but it's not the vehicle. If you try to enter transcendence via the intellect, you will be repelled. You will be repelled. And it's very unbecoming to see someone think they've thought, for me, from my perspective, think they've thought through Gaudiya Vaishnavism and
Got it all figured out.
On to the next, what's the latest in physics or Millimar, a little deeper than, some old dusty book from 500 years ago, poetic book. We differ. We agree with Krishnadas here. So, get too far in the chapter here. I mean, it's a strong statement, requires some explanation. Called educated people croaking frogs, and when they hear Prabhupada say it, wish he hadn't said that. Go very far, and we live in pluralistic times now, and let's all be friends. Everybody's got some knowledge, of course, and there are, I wouldn't say it like this. Here together, he's saying it. I'm trying to defend him, but there are other ways to say the same thing, softer perhaps. But we got to put at the same place, the same point. Material knowing is ignorance. It's not making people happy. So, any question? Yes.
With regard to that statement, I mean, it's not anything different from what we hear in the Bhagavatam. Compared to the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says everything else is like a place of pilgrimage for crows, which is just a nice name for a dump.
Yeah, it's a dump. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they have mince the words. Right?
Yeah. So
They're very blunt. Yeah. Yes.
When you were speaking the other day on Sridhar Maharaj's Parents' Day, you were explaining how Srila Prabhupada really set the foundation for Ragmarg by explaining Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and just really bringing that home. Now, as you were speaking, you quoted Aham Sarvasya Pramano Pravartate. And the way you started to say it, I thought you were going to explain it in a Ragmarg, that verse, in a Ragmarg kind of way, because of maybe you thought it in the last line, but then your thought went somewhere off and you didn't fall
Yeah,
in
well, the
line.
verse says, Krishna saying, I'm Sarvasya Prabhavaso, I am the Supreme Personality of God. Everything comes from me. Ryan comes from me. Everything comes from me. So he says, basically he says, knowing this, then one is in a position to engage in a kind of bhajan practice by which one can know me as such, experience me as such. So, excuse me, Sridhar Maharaj translated the third line there. Nam sarvasya prabhavo matasa vantavartate, kimatva bhajante mam, Buddha bhava samandita, raga bhava samandita. Or you can say Buddha bhava samandita. One gets the kind of Buddha, kind of knowing, sambit, Buddha bhava samandita, that by which I can be known as such. In other words, the ironic thing is to know Krishna through bhajan as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to not know that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the kind of unknowing on the part of the bhakta that constitutes more comprehensive knowing than the knowing, for example, that Narayan is God. So if you have this in place, who Krishna is, he's saying I'm Rasaraj. So if you want to give completely, you have to have a source that will take completely. Krishna is the person that can take. Narayan can't take in the same way. He cannot take different approaches of love in the same way that Krishna can, to the same extent. So understanding him as such, then obviously that's the divide, if you will, between him and Narayan, or the possibilities, and in any of his avatars, Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa, Madhurya Rasa. These are only possible with Krishna. This constitutes Kamrup and Samandarup Bhakti. So that's why I say that is a foundational point, a philosophical point that needs to be in place in order to proceed on the Rag Marg, through which in due course, then the philosophical truth is overridden by the sentiment that arises from knowing that I can give myself fully here and give in the ways that arguably transcend reverential love, and then the fact that he's the personality of God, the Supreme Personality of God, recedes to the background. That's the beginning of the Chaturshloki of the Gita, which where you find Raghunaga Bhakti there. That's the first of the 4 verses, and he explains Tushanti Chara Munti Cha later as it proceeds. He explains Samandanuga, Samandarupa, and Kamarupa Bhakti means Vatsalya, Dasya, Sakya, and Madhurya, all of which you find in Golok. So
Buddha Bhava, Raga Bhava is what Sridhar Maharaj?
Yeah. So it's a big topic, but we've gone for quite a length tonight. So tomorrow is the Govardhan Puja. Shri Govardhan Maharaj Ki Jai. So we have a somewhat of an abbreviated program in the morning. After Mangalarti, I'll read from Sridhar Maharaj's explanation of what he considers the key verse from that chapter. Chapter describing the Govardhan Leela, and then head to the pasture, I guess. Ready to go there, and we'll have a nice. It's not a day for fasting; it's a day for feasting. So it'll be nice prasadam and so forth, and then in the evening we'll discuss something about it.
So right after Mangalarti, we're going to.
Right after Mangalarti, no, we're going to read it, and then just
after that time.
After that, I'll be over there. I've got things to do, and cows are there, and I'm not organizing anything. I'll be around.
Yeah.
Over there. Welcome to come as well. I think you take the little turn into the pasture. It's been nice for you. And
she's anxious. She's anxious to go.
Anxious to go, yeah. Yeah. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrta.
Jai.
Pancha Kalpa Tarigya.